Well, Mexico's trying something for the first time ever in history. They are trying to force gun owners into adopting gun control and giving us an ultimatum if we don't do it. That's what we're going to look at today as I expose the hypocrisy with how Mexico is actually treating the gun industry and gun owners, and the way they actually are ignoring their own problem, which is a part of the ultimatum. It's really kind of fascinating and very disgusting, the approach that they're taking to try to fix the issues in their country that it doesn't really look like they want to fix. Now, I've talked about this issue with Mexico and gun manufacturers in previous videos, but there's some other things that I found out after those videos that I think will highlight even more of the hypocrisy, and the extent that Mexico is willing to go is actually pretty disgusting. Now, of course, I'm going to give you my opinion. Leave yours down below. Let's go and jump right in.
But few people are talking about another crisis at the border: guns, specifically American guns.
So Mexico has opened this lawsuit with the gun industry, and initially it was shut down because there is a Protection Act in place for firearm manufacturers, right? You cannot tell a manufacturer that, hey, you made a product, somebody used that product in a bad way, and now we're holding you responsible. It's illogical, okay? And so, besides, I think, Remington and Sandy Hook, it's never been attempted. And originally it was shot down until a First Circuit Court of Appeals somewhere up north said, you know what? We think the manufacturers actually do play a part in this by using an exemption that is actually in that Protection Act. And the exemption basically is them saying that the gun manufacturers willingly sell to gun shops that know they're actually dealing in crime guns. It's an absurdity, but it's gone through now. And so it is going to the Supreme Court. My prediction is it will get shut down there, but if it doesn't, that's something we really need to talk about, because that will change the landscape of gun ownership in the United States. That's not hyperbole. It literally will change the landscape for gun owners. So how did we get here? Well, the First Circuit Court of Appeals says that manufacturers are selling to problematic gun shops. Some of these problematic gun shops that they've listed say that they have a certain amount of guns that are traced back to crimes that are used in Mexico. It's very similar to kind of what they do, I forget the rule or whatever it is that ATF uses for crime guns in a certain area. So it's like 25 crime guns within 3 years. Then you have to report any like used gun sales that you have quarterly, right? So it's kind of like that. And they're saying that these gun shops are knowingly selling these guns to people that work for the cartel. And while there are some indicators, I've talked to some of my buddies at the gun shop. One of the clearest indicators is, hey, they walk in with a girlfriend, they're looking at the gun, they say, oh, I like that one. And then the girlfriend pays, right? Or something like that. But they also use parameters that a lot of us would fall into. Going to the gun shop every couple of days or every couple of weeks, paying in cash, buying multiple guns at the same time is an indicator, right? If that was the case, like 90% of my audience would be on some kind of watch list or something. I mean, really, it is to that point, buying multiple firearms. Like, that's nothing new for a lot of us, right? So anyways, those are some of the indicators they say these gun shops need to be looking at. Now, in the defense of the gun manufacturers, first of all, they shouldn't be required to not sell to a gun shop just because there's been more guns traced back to crimes used in Mexico or anywhere else, because now you're saying, hey, that population, those people that go to that gun shop, that depend on that gun shop for the needs and their rights to be exercised, well, yeah, screw those people. We're just not going to sell to them. I understand why the manufacturers say, no, we're not going to do that. Now, if this gun shop is clearly just ignoring every single law, rule, restriction, all of that kind of stuff out there, first of all, the ATF is going to shut them down so freaking quick, you're not even going to have to worry about them anymore. These guys have very strict regulations, policies, paperwork. There's so much that goes on behind the scenes that most gun owners don't even really know about, and you just can't predict all of them. Well, Mexico thinks that we should. And so Here's the problem with Mexico is they have had decades worth of history that tells us they're not going to take on the problem in their country. They say that we are arming the cartel, but I don't know, I forget what year it was, but the previous president of Mexico, he had a 6-year period where crime was higher than it had ever been, right? They actually caught El Chapo's son, Guzman Lopez, caught him. One of the biggest distributors of this famous illicit substance that comes in the United States. I'm navigating TOS, sorry, but one of the biggest distributors. Then the cartel comes in with 600 guys. Firefight ensues, right, against the police force. What does the government do with that guy? They release him. They don't want no more issues. Now, is Claudia Sheinbaum the one that's going to take on the cartel? Maybe, maybe not. But all we know is the established pattern of Mexican government, police, and others is that, first of all, they're the biggest employer in Mexico. Second, we have not seen much evidence to support that they're actually going to take on the cartel. When their back's against the wall, it seems like they back off, essentially. They don't want nothing to do with it. And so Sheinbaum, gets offended when Trump is like, hey, they're a terrorist organization. While I don't support us invading them, right, I think something has to be done. And labeling them as a terrorist organization is a first step, but something has to be done because technically we're at war with them already. They say we're supplying guns to them, which is causing a ton of people losing their lives in their country. What about the people, the tens of thousands in our country? So it's almost a silent war. So how do you end that? Well, it's definitely not going after gun owners and gun manufacturers, but they're just trying to shift the blame. They're basically trying to pass gun control because they know they can't effectively stop the cartel on their own. And if they could, would they? So by forcing gun manufacturers to pay $30 billion or whatever, it's a crazy amount of money, you would cripple the gun industry. What she's saying is, we're going to cripple the gun industry in which you have to then adopt gun control. That is their form of it. The ultimatum that Mexico is giving us is basically, hey, you take on the gun industry, you cripple them with this lawsuit, or otherwise it's going to continue and the substance is going to continue to come into your country because you're arming this cartel that is really our problem. Now, this form of gun control is pretty disgusting. First of all, I want to point out that if you think gun control works, you got to look no further than Mexico because they have some of the strictest gun control ever, right? One gun shop in the entire country, and yet some of the highest violent crime in any country, in the world. So what it says is that criminals will find a way to get guns, trucks, whatever kind of weapon they can use to cause destruction and harm. Gun control doesn't work. But they want to cripple the gun industry. That's their biggest thing. That's their ultimatum. We cripple them with the financials. Because, look, gun companies, there's not a high margin there, right? And under Trump, gun companies typically some of them will go out of business. Some of them have in the past because people aren't freaking out about gun control anymore. And so if you not only force them to pay for lawyers or drag this out as far as you can, but then, God forbid, there is some kind of settlement. Let's say the Supreme Court says, you know what, actually, we think they may be held liable. And gun companies had to pay for that. Guess what? Some of your biggest gun companies are not going to be able to supply us, law-abiding gun owners, with firearms that we need to protect our family, to exercise our rights. You put a $30 billion lawsuit on the gun industry, you might as well shut them down right then and there. And guess what? The cartel that still has the guns that they have will still have them, and there will be Dems all across this nation that will be celebrating. Even though we'll still have 300 million, let's pretend that happened, we'll still have 300 million. The cartel is still going to have theirs. The cartel's still going to operate. Nothing is going to change except for infringing on the rights of those that can no longer get firearms from these manufacturers. That's how Mexico is trying to take the attention off of their own problem and force the gun industry into basically shutting down, which is a form of gun control, and that's what they want at the end of the day, to shift blame from themselves to us because it just sounds easier for them, even though we all know they're not doing anything on their side to really stop that issue. Or they're definitely damn well not doing enough, that's for sure. So there you go. That's my opinion. I'd love to hear yours. How far do you think this actually goes? What do you think the Supreme Court says about it? Any other ideas, suggestions, or comments that you want to leave about this topic? Let me know down below. If you like what I do, consider subscribing. See you in the next one. And as always, hold them down.